for an insightful idea that takes the center stage and the conversation that gets beyond the headlines, to explore the lasting impact of political decisions. Big Talk got you covered. From policy debates to geopolitical insights, from thought-provoking discussions to actionable insight.
What is the real responsibility of government?
Big Talk delves deep into the heart of the matter. Join us weekdays on global televisions from 6:30 p.m. for a reverting journey into the heart of politics, where we dissect issues shaping our society.
A big welcome and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Big Talk here on Global Television, an extension of a happy holiday celebrate. And of course, in the program tonight, we'll be taking a look at the political instability in Africa, which is also giving rises to the issues faced by the educational sector. A part of this was highlighted during the press conference by Africa Student Union yesterday in a World Press Conference. But let's take a look at the fact that on 15th April 2023, a violent clash erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces in the Sudan, resulting in the displacement of more than 8.6 million people, including internally displaced people and asylum seekers and refugees. This conflict has excavated many of the Sudan's existing challenges, including the ongoing conflict, the disease outbreaks, economic and political instability, and the climate emergencies. And for making the matter worse, away from Sudan, all the African countries have been victims of these political instability, which has also affected the educational sector. Among several other issues that were highlighted at the World Press Conference yesterday, will be what we'll be looking at on the program today. We'll go on a quick way right now. Once we return, we'll be speaking with my guest. Stay with us. Tonight on the program, the president of All Africa Student Union, of course, Comrade Osiziogo Osigei, is live here on the program to add voices to these interactions and, of course, also bear his thought and mind towards the several issues encountered by the region and, of course, the issues that have been affecting the educational sector here in Africa. Good to have you join us on the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming around. Yes, I mean, yesterday, the press briefing had highlighted several issues, and it worries some because it seems the educational sector is under threat by the fact that many times the instability in politics and governance and all of those issues in many countries are having a direct effect on the students, the peoples, and a child, Africa child. To you, what has been your concern at all of this prior to even yesterday's briefing?
Yes, so thank you very much. Of course, you know, Africa is just a thriving continent. It's a continent that is actually bedeviled by a lot of issues that affect access to education, economic issues, climate change, having the nomadic farmers having to move their families from one place to the other, displacing them irrespective of whether a school is where they are going or not. But aggravating that matter is the spree of armed conflict across the continent. Of course, the most popular one now is when you talk about Sudan. Right now, a lot of students have to flee Sudan. A lot of them have to flee into South Sudan. And of course, South Sudan is another pariah situation that has the highest illiteracy level in the world. Today, South Sudan has about 70% as the post-conflict South Sudan. Of course, you can recall that South Sudan had armed conflict going for over almost 30 years. And of course, gaining independence, they're yet to find their feet. And then Sudan, that was their, so to speak, colonial masters, are also in this matter. And it is also aggravating that situation. Somalia is also within that East Africa. We've also had parts of Congo, which probably, if we must say the truth, are ungovernable because of action activities of ADF terrorists. We've also had Kenya, northeastern Kenya, Garissa State University, that was attacked almost 10 years ago, and I'm not sure that school has come back, on its feet. Yesterday, we marked the Kasese school killing of over 40 students on the 16th of June in 2023. This is just talking about East Africa. Of course, we are very familiar with the issues along the western coast, I mean, the Chad Basin, Nigeria, Cameroon, and all of those places. That northeastern Nigeria, of course, you know the adverse effects of activities of Boko Haram in those areas. And of course, that is to tell you across Africa, the extent to which we've had armed conflicts, displaced students, and of course, the more important thing, that is why we called for the Safe School Declaration to be. I've also observed that even the Nigeria's defense, the military has a unit, a department for safe school that is here in Nigeria. I don't know how much more it is in other countries. Most of these people, when there's only conflict, the easy place they go to find a camp for their soldiers are schools. I have visited personally a lot of crisis-ridden areas, including Tigray region in Ethiopia. Only in the last 1 year, I've been there about thrice. And I see for myself the extent to which militia go to take over campuses as concentration camps. That is where the military stay, and they send students away, and of course home. Only in Tigray region, mind the Tigray region is not the whole of Ethiopia. Within the 2-year armed conflict between the Tigray region and the central government of Ethiopia, and of course on the other side, the Eritrea government, and of course Amhara, almost 2 million children were out of school only in that region, only in Ethiopia alone, only in the Tigray region of Ethiopia alone. So, of course, that is also what is happening now in Sudan. We also have the on good authority because the soldiers will be able to find beddings for themselves. They have, that is a camp. That is, they convert hostels to concentration camp. And of course, classrooms begin to be where they train infant soldiers. So we have evidences of that, because there is a very direct nexus between armed conflict and attack on education. And it's important that we address these issues. They are highly unreported as well, I must also add. So if we must see how we can improve access to education, we must also see how some of these conflicting parties must always respect campuses whenever there is crisis. And of course, they must also learn how not to put children out of school whenever there is crisis anywhere, anytime.
To you, what do you feel are the mechanism to manage all of this? Because sometimes these are something that happens in some countries unawares, and at the measure of response, what do you think should be in place to be able to, cater for all of this?
Yes, I think the Safe School Declaration of the African Union, African Union at some point declared September 19th the AU Day for Protection of Education from Attack. They also have a Safe School Declaration, and all of these declarations, I think they should walk the talk.
So it's not implemented?
Of course, it's not implemented because today nobody talking about Somalia, nobody talking about Sudan. Nobody talked about the extent to which education infrastructure is destroyed entirely in South Sudan. Nobody is talking about what has happened in Northeast, except for the effort by the federal government and the state governments of Borno, Yobe, and other places to rehabilitate, resettle, and of course reintegrate people in that area. So it should be a serious matter. We should take it as serious as we take vaccination. Education, to me, we need to invest more in education. So these children, and even when parents are willing to send their children to school, schools are not safe. Of course, just last year in Kasese, we saw what happened. We heard about it because it was reported. And I assure you that if that one was reported, there are so many others that go unreported so that the governments of those countries will not be embarrassed.
You also demanded for the release of arrested Malian students and activists. To you, did these people not break the law?
Yes, Siriman Niare is the president of Association des étudiants les élèves maliens. In Bamako in February, he was arrested alongside other student leaders. But what our worry is that up to down, he has not had a day in court. And our challenge is, yes, they said there has been a clash on campus, and we are yet to get a full report as to, they said every effort to reach the Mali Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also told us that because of the nature of government of Mali, of because it's a military regime now, that we are not able to have him to have a day in court. So if it is not a politically motivated victimization, we should be able to know what it is that is a problem. And of course, we should not deny the entire students of Mali of a leadership at a critical time like this, a transitional time in their lives.
So will you say military regime is also undermining efforts of good education in that region? From your analysis, because some of these countries you've highlighted are majorly countries who are not democratic.
Let me tell you something too. Most of these countries don't have a problem taking over campuses as a concentration camps. And of course, for instance, some of these countries, some of the most vocal people are maybe lecturers. You know how professors are able to speak up. And many, if you go to prisons in those countries, you see very sound minds, people who have their research half-baked. You know, they don't mind if they're able, if you're a lecturer on a campus, but if they have any reason to arrest you, they will arrest you without replacing you and that, in that school. Instances abound. So I don't really want to draw a direct nexus between military leadership and attack on education. But again, there are some considerations they are supposed to make. If I'm allowed to deny these students in their hundreds of the services of a lecturer, we're also expected to make sure that they have options. Mind you, these countries are not like Nigeria. They have a very wide higher education space. Some of them are so small that you may not have too many lecturers who can step in such shoes. That is actually in the aspect of lecturers.
All right. One of those issues you also highlighted was the issue of high costs of education in the region.
Yes.
I mean, when you look at the fact that education sometimes have been subsidized by some government. We've seen in Nigeria where some state government are doing all of that. So to you, it's not been replicated in other regions of Africa?
Yes, education should be a priority. It should be a non-negotiable priority among any developing country, not just Africa. So I think high cost of education is the fact that some governments are abdicating their responsibility to educate their people. Yes, now our problem is basic education. We talk about issue of access more. Now, is it accessible? Is it affordable? But we have not so much talked about issue of quality for basic education students. Of course, because the space is covered by the proliferation of so many private schools that provide expensive but somehow better education. But for higher education, we feel that the government should play more roles. It's just like the same way they invest in training soldiers that is supposed to protect the territorial integrity of the country. They're supposed to be very conscious as to who are those people who are going to take over from us in future. These are the students. If you abdicate that role to only parents and guardians and students themselves to educate themselves, it becomes very, very difficult. And of course, I think government in Africa must take education much more seriously than is taking it. We have seen laudably, of course, Nigeria has introduced the education loan scheme, but I think there's also much more that can be done. In Kenya, there is what they call Higher Education Loans Board, HELB. The Higher Education Loans Board also does similar things that student loan scheme seems to have done. Now, these issues of armed conflicts has not affected Southern Africa so much, except for Mozambique that has pockets of insurgency. South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, they have the most excellent access to education. But I tell you, issue of cost is also a big problem. It's not too far. Some years ago, you've seen South African students rising to do fees must fall riots in South Africa. Those issues are still persisting. Recently in Kenya, school fees were increased, and that also is the case with many African countries. Of course, you've seen state governments here and there increasing school fees here in Nigeria. I think more of abdicating the responsibility of educating its citizens. So I want to also call on government to step on its responsibility than abdicating it for only the highest bidders. How about those who cannot afford it? I think government should be worried about those ones too.
There are issues where government have probably invested in education, but sometimes the quality of people we have who are transferring knowledge is an issue. We've seen where governors have conducted, an impromptu test for some teachers, and at the end of the day, even the teachers who are teaching the students or the pupils are failing the exams. To you, is that also a role of government? Because these are the issues away from the investing. Look at public schools and private schools. You see the challenge.
Yeah.
These are recruited processes of teachers who are in the classroom compared to these other processes. Who are to be blaming this recruitment? Meanwhile, if the government does not recruit, these are the same people that keep on hammering on government because these are graduates. So the graduates that were turning out from the universities, from the system of education, are also transferring knowledge to the young ones, are also put on the spotlight to be an issue.
Yes. For instance, you see issue of remuneration of lecturers. Keep resurfacing with the academic staff union industrial actions that come in repeatedly. It was almost become an annual ritual that academic staff union almost every 1 or 2 years come back to crisis. What is that telling you? That they are not properly remunerated. And if they are properly remunerated, they will attract the best of hands. I tell you, lecturing or teaching is actually a very noble profession. What is putting the best minds away from that is the fact that they're not properly remunerated. Many of our people who still go abroad still end up teaching over there because they are better paid, and of course they also have good facilities for research and all of that. So I think that you cannot overemphasize the place of funding education, and I think that if education is better funded, it will attract better minds to it than it is right now. So I would not say that we have poor quality lecturers. I will only say that we are very able to attract what we are able to afford right now.
So there's anything that can be done, something can be done more than this?
Yes, also to incentivize those who are already there. There are people who are also very good. There are lecturers who are very good, who are just stayed there because of passion. They cannot peer review themselves with their mates in other sectors. So we need to incentivize them to remain, and of course attract other people to make this sector very, very attractive to people. But I'm sure that we have TET fund here in Nigeria that invests about 2% of petroleum profit into education, which is also boosting their quest to also recharge. The university's mandate is not only about teaching and learning. There's also a very critical component of research, which is also very important. We have also called that countries in Africa that are discovering oil like Nigeria, to replicate TET fund in South Sudan. In Namibia has just discovered oil. Namibia is very close to Angola that already has oil and all of that. So all of these countries, as they discover oil, solid minerals, as their revenue increases, they should also find a way to increase funding to education by replicating the mandate of an agency like TET Fund in Nigeria. It would help us attract better hands, and confine the era of discussing whether our lecturers are qualified or not to the dustbin of the forgetful past.
All right. I mean, several issues we will get a touch, but issues of financing education in Africa is also a major concern. So, we'll go on a quick way right now. And once we return, we'll be looking at public-private partnership and all the other ways of financing education in Africa, away from the fact that political instability is in some of this region. But what can we be able to put in place to also encourage people to be back to school? Remember, there are statistics from the United Nations that out of school children, in Africa, it's quite very worrisome. So all of these will be what we'll be looking at shortly after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Many times for still stay with us. We are taking a look at the implications of the many political instability in Africa and the impact on the educational sector. Because at the end of the day, the leaders of tomorrow must be well educated, and the level of education of these countries also have a way of also showing who they are able to produce in the future. All of these are also what governments in the region must begin to take absolute concern with. So I'm still speaking with Comrade Osisiegu, who is the president of Africa Student Union. Let's take a look at investment in the regional education. When you look at the fact that, you highlighted the fact that Dangote, from his own part, is also investing in that sector, and public-private partnership must also be aware, because when you look at the fact that government seems not to be doing these things alone, and the highest employer of labor is also the fact that it's a private sector. So that means that economically, the GDP, they also have the path to grow, and investing in education must also be. But what has been the challenge of the private sectors also coming in to invest in education?
Yes, our challenge is also boils down to that of priority. If, for instance, I know that I have interest in this sector, most of my manpower, most of the skilled labor I require to run my establishment, is going to come from this sector. Investing in it is going to be very profitable for me in the midterm. Okay, so for Dangote, I've seen a few investments in education sector. Go to schools, you will see Dangote infrastructures, and a few other. There are some banks that has also set up ICT centers, and also Dangote paying up school fees of giving scholarship to some people. There's also Dangote University and all of that. So for me, I believe that if by act of parliament or by legislation, just like it is with TED Fund, that you tell big establishments to invest at least 2-3% of their profits of their CSR. Maybe in this camp, if you say that only at least 20% of CSR of every corporation should be in education or education-related ventures, you would see that today entertainment is booming. See, a whole football is booming. Other parts of entertainment is booming, probably more than education, because CSR from corporate organization is going to them, and they have the know-how, they have the technical skill set to access these CSR. Look at our lecturers, look at our vice chancellors. How many of them have the very working advancement units that can engage CSR of a public organization to come? You see, maybe BUK is able to convince the Dangote from Kano, to invest with them. Of course, Dangote has gone to, I've seen them University of Port Harcourt, I've seen them in University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and a lot of other schools. So what I think is that there should be an act of parliament compelling corporate organizations to bring counterpart funding to education to the tune of at least 20-30% of their CSR must be in education-related ventures. Of course, there is going to be health, there's going to be social security, there's going to, of course, be entertainment, there's going to be other forms of human development, but a very sizable aspect of the CSR should go to education. And you see the vice chancellor's doors will be knocked every time looking for projects to execute for them. Today, the vice chancellor does not need to go to TED Fund to get TED Fund projects on his campuses. So I think the National Assembly of Nigeria and those of other countries need to consider a legislation that would compel CSR for education to be backed by an act of parliament.
A lot of concern, and when it's worrisome is the fact that the role of the private, the CSR, the corporate social responsibility of the private sector, who are those in charge of, is there a body that regulates that intervention? Because sometimes when you look at the fact that the academic sector, the academic union might not have what it takes to be able to, attract these investment and advantage. To you, what do you think away from legislation? Because we've had several laws. I mean, we are in the country, we are in the region where there are several black and white. There are several laws in the black and white papers. At the end of the day, it's not been implemented. To you, what other moves can be incorporated to see how we can be able to attract this? Because investing in education, if you go to the Western world, I mean, it's what many people do with joy. We've seen several scholarships granted to even students in Africa to go abroad to study. So several times we've seen that a lot of education have been funded, and then people, prioritize all of these to go school abroad. So it is for the fact that priority, away from the priority, there must be an organized structure to be able to curb all of these to take advantage with.
Laws are very powerful. Those are like you are supposed to pay a tax and you don't pay it. Of course, there is consequence at the end of the day. So laws makes you a litigable entity. That if you are not able to do it and the universities fail to even sue you, civil society can take that up, leveraging on the existing laws. That look, you are supposed to invest this percentage in education related. You should show if it's if I must digress to entertainment. Burna Boy say no be by show workings. So at the end of the day, organizations like the All Africa Students Union, the NANS, civil society can come policing you to make sure that look, this laboratory is not in place in this school. This is what have you done with the about 20% of your 5% CSR. No. So laws are very enabling. Let us take that step first. I'm sure the rest will align.
Many thanks, very comrade Sisi-Ogu, and of course for your thought and contribution. You made mention of the fact that don't vaccinate us, educate us.
Yes.
To you, for the vaccines of 2020, a lesser priority for government.
Yes, anyway, we have not taken an appraisal of the vaccination that we took 4 years ago. So malaria has been a perennial crisis, I acknowledge. It has adverse economic impact. It actually is life-threatening and all of that. There are so many ways to kill a rat. I don't know why, Africa and Asia happens to be the places that we want to test some of these approaches. How did America fight malaria? How did Europe fight malaria? So we want to think that there are so many resources that is to be deployed into some of these, I will call it temporary ventures than in education. So if you have a facility to get vaccination to the most interior villages in Burkina Faso, why is education not there waiting for vaccination? So I think education has suffered a lot of misplaced priority, and I think education is more important than vaccination. And there are other means that are Africanly that we can combat malaria with, not necessarily rushing into vaccination that we cannot prove its efficacy and, of course, the sustainability of the impact.
Finally, what has been the role of African Union Commission in all of these, or what you're championing and the advocacy so far?
Like I have acknowledged that the African Union Commission has had the Safe School Declaration, and of course I've acknowledged that also they have declared the September 19th of every year the Year of Protection of Education from Attack. But again, I've also acknowledged that they have done a few things to try to remediate crisis in Tigray region in Ethiopia by establishing the Horn of Africa community chaired by President Obasanjo and Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya. I've also acknowledged the role they are playing in Sudan and all of that. But of course, there is a role that they need to play for education, the same role they play for hospitals. Of course, today you shout that, Israel is bombing Palestine and hospitals are attacked. That is also how we need to shout that education institutions are also being attacked. So I think African Union needs to, already having those declarations, they also need to have them backed up by actions. So let us remove declare and then leave action in place after every declaration.
Away from the academic exercise of declaration.
Yes.
Thank you, Comrade Sisi-Ogu, President All Africa Student Union, for your contributions and your thought on the program. We do hope that some of these advocacies on what you demanded will come to reality in the Africa's region, because it's for the growth of the region.
We are very optimistic, and it is high time. It is now. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
As a comrade, we do share with you on that agitation. Many
Thank
thanks
you
for joining us on the program.
Thank you very
And
much.
that's where we begin to wrap it up here on the program. And of course, don't forget the fact that in Edo State, there are several political moves by the agitators. The former deputy governor, Philip Shaibu, has backed up the APC candidate. That will also form part of a discussion tomorrow on the program, Big Talk. Do still stay with us, and of course, on subsequent programs here on the TV. My name is Edikat Michael. Bye-bye for now.